All right, I've got 3 AI video generators lined up, and instead of just picking one based on a single cool-looking clip, I want to actually put them through the same test and see what happens. Because, let's be real, almost every AI video tool can look impressive when you give it an easy prompt. The real question is, what happens when you start asking for more? So I'm giving all 3 tools 3 rounds to work with: easy, medium, and hard. And with every round, I'm going to make the prompt a little more demanding and see how well each one keeps up. By the end of this, we should have a pretty clear idea of which tool is actually the most consistent when things start getting complicated. I already have a feeling one of these might come out on top, but I'm keeping that to myself for now. I want to see if you end up choosing the same one I did. So while you're watching each result, pay attention to the details, the movement, and how well the tool actually follows the prompt. Then drop your winner in the comments. All right, enough talking. Let's start the test. One quick thing before we jump in though. These tools do have free ways to try them, but they're not unlimited free generators. You'll usually get a certain number of credits or free generations to start with, and some platforms may refresh or add credits over time depending on the tool. So if you just want to mess around with a few prompts, compare the outputs, and get a feel for what each one can actually do, you can start there without jumping straight into a paid plan. And if you end up finding one that fits what you need, you can always look at the paid options later. I've put the relevant resources and links down in the description. All right, coming in at number 3, we've got Qwen AI. First, just open up your browser, search for Qwen AI, and head over to the official website. Once you're there, log in, and we can jump straight into the first test. I don't want to start with anything too crazy, so we're going to begin with an easy prompt and see how Qwen handles a pretty straightforward scene. For the easy test, I'm using POV, sprinting toward a gigantic coastal cliff and jumping into the ocean far below. And yeah, this is a fairly simple idea, but the result actually looks really good. The movement feels smooth, the environment has some nice detail, and the whole shot comes together without feeling messy. It's a pretty basic generation, but it gives us a good starting point for the harder tests. Now let's turn things up a little. For the medium test, I'm going with camera racing alongside a gigantic freight train through a desert at high speed, with the wheels and machinery vibrating realistically. Okay, this is already a much busier scene. We've got a huge moving object, a fast camera, the desert environment, plus all those little mechanical details happening at the same time. And Qwen still does a solid job keeping everything together. The sense of speed comes through pretty well, and you can definitely see the generation getting more challenging as we add more elements into the frame. But now we're taking it all the way up to the hard test. This is where I really want to see if the quality starts falling apart once the camera movement gets more aggressive. So for the final prompt, I'm using ultra-fast FPV drone weaving between skyscrapers, diving through narrow gaps, and suddenly dropping towards street level. All right, this is definitely the toughest generation of the 3. There's a ton happening here. The camera is moving insanely fast, the gaps are super tight, and the environment has way more detail to keep track of. But honestly, the result still looks really solid. The movement stays pretty convincing, the skyscrapers give the shot a lot of depth, and the whole thing has that fast-paced FPV feel we were looking for. So for our first tool, Qwen AI definitely gives us a pretty strong start, especially once we move beyond the basic prompt and start pushing the generation harder. Cool. Now let's jump over to tool number 2, Google Flow. I'm keeping the exact same testing setup here because I want this comparison to actually be fair. Same 3 levels, same idea of gradually increasing the difficulty, and we'll see how Flow handles each one without changing the rules halfway through. So first up is the easy test. First-person zipline ride flying down an enormous canyon at extreme speed with cliffs and trees rushing underneath. And right away, this one looks really clean. The camera movement feels smooth, the sense of speed comes through nicely, and there's a lot of depth in the environment. Even with a pretty simple prompt, the result already gives us a strong-looking shot. Now let's make things more demanding with the medium prompt. Camera racing alongside a gigantic freight train through a desert at high speed, with the wheels and machinery vibrating realistically. Okay, there's definitely a lot more going on here. We've got the massive train moving at high speed, the camera tracking alongside it, and all those little mechanical details that need to stay consistent. But Flow handles it really well. The train feels huge, the desert environment looks convincing, and you can actually feel the speed as it moves through the scene. Now it's time for the hard test, and this is is the one I was really waiting for. I want to see if the quality can stay consistent once we throw a much more aggressive camera movement into the mix. So I'm using ultra-fast FPV drone weaving between skyscrapers, diving through narrow gaps and suddenly dropping towards street level. And wow, this one came out seriously strong. There's a crazy amount happening in this shot. The camera is moving insanely fast, and the drone has to navigate some really tight spaces, but the generation still stays surprisingly clean. The skyscrapers give the shot a ton of depth, and that sudden drop towards street level makes the whole thing feel even more dynamic. So yeah, after running all 3 levels, Google Flow definitely gave me some really strong results, and it held up especially well once we started pushing the prompts harder. Alright, now we're down to tool number 1, TikTok Symphony. This one is especially interesting because it's built around short-form content and ad creatives. So instead of throwing another random cinematic scene at it, I wanted to see how it handles actual product-focused shots. And honestly, this is probably the test I was most curious about, because making a product look good is one thing, but making it feel like a real ad is a whole different challenge. So let's start with the easy test. I'm going with a compact air purifier. A sleek, compact air purifier sitting on a modern bedside table, slowly rotating as soft morning light comes through the window. Clean, minimal room, realistic materials, subtle shadows, and a premium product commercial look. And honestly, this came out really clean. The product stays easy to see, the lighting feels natural, and the whole setup already has that polished commercial vibe without looking too overdone. For a simple product shot, this is a pretty solid start. Now let's make things a lot more dynamic with the medium test. This time, I'm using an electric skateboard. A modern electric skateboard cruising through a clean downtown street at sunset. Smooth tracking camera following from a low angle. Wheels moving naturally. Warm sunlight reflecting off the deck. Realistic motion blur. And a stylish lifestyle advertisement look. Okay, this is definitely a step up. There's way more movement happening now, and I really like the way the camera follows the board instead of just keeping it locked in one spot. You've got the moving wheels, the changing background, the reflections, and that low-angle tracking shot all working together. It feels much closer to something you'd actually see in a real product commercial. But now we're going to push it even further with the hard test. And this time, I'm going with a smart ring. A premium smart ring floating above a dark reflective surface, starting with an extreme macro close-up of the textured metal finish, then smoothly rotating as glowing interface elements appear around it. Dramatic studio lighting, realistic reflections, detailed materials, subtle particles in the air, controlled cinematic camera movement, and a high-end technology advertisement style. And yeah, this is definitely the most demanding one of the 3. We've got an extreme close-up, reflections, moving interface elements, changing lighting, tiny product details, and controlled camera movement all packed into one shot. That's a lot for any video generator to keep track of. But honestly, the result still looks really solid. The product stays visually interesting, the lighting gives it that premium feel, and the whole thing works really well as an ad style concept. So across all 3 levels, TikTok Symphony did a really good job, especially once we moved from a simple product shot into these more dynamic commercial style scenes. And I think that's what makes this test pretty interesting. We're not just looking at whether the video looks cool, we're looking at whether the tool can actually turn an idea into something that feels usable for content. And with that, we've officially reached the end of the comparison. We put all 3 tools through the same basic structure, started with an easier generation, pushed the prompts further, and then really tested what happens when the scenes get more complicated. And honestly, each one had some strong moments. Some handled the fast camera movement better, some looked stronger with detailed environments, and then we had TikTok Symphony handling those product and ad style shots really well. But after watching everything side by side, I definitely have one tool that I'd personally put at number 1. I'm not going to give that away just yet though. I want to know what you thought after seeing the results, because you might have a completely different winner. So drop your pick in the comments and tell me which one you'd actually use. And if you want to try these tools yourself or test out the prompts I used in this video, I've put the relevant resources and links in the description. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.